The hospital was a place of quiet desperation, a labyrinth of white walls and fluorescent lights that buzzed faintly, like the hum of a distant storm. It was early morning, the kind of hour when the world outside seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the sun to rise. The corridors were empty, save for the occasional nurse or orderly moving silently through the halls. In room 214, an elderly man lay in bed, his breathing shallow but steady. His name was Henry Thompson, and he had been admitted to the hospital 3 weeks ago. The doctors had done all they could, but it was clear to everyone. Henry's time was running out. Henry was a man of few words, but there was a quiet dignity about him that commanded respect. His face was lined with the marks of a life well lived, though his eyes often held a distant, haunted look, as if he were carrying a weight too heavy to bear. He had no family to visit him, no friends to sit by his bedside. The nurses had tried to contact his relatives, but every lead had turned up empty. It was as if Henry had appeared out of nowhere, a mystery wrapped in wrinkled skin and fading memories. Before we dive, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. And while you're here, hit that like button, share with your friends, and subscribe so you never miss a story that will leave you speechless. Now let's get into it. But today something was different. Henry had asked for a pen and paper. His hands trembled as he held the pen, his fingers gnarled with age, the knuckles swollen and stiff. He began to write, slowly and deliberately, as if every word carried the weight of a lifetime. The nurse on duty, Emily Carter, watched him from the doorway. She had been working at the hospital for 5 years, and in that time she had seen countless patients come and go. But there was something about Henry that tugged at her heart, something in the way he carried himself, in the quiet determination with which he wrote, that made her pause. Emily stepped into the room, her shoes squeaking softly against the polished floor. "Mr. Thompson," she said gently, "is there anything I can do to help you?" Henry looked up, his eyes cloudy but focused. "I need to write this letter," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's for my grandson. I need him to know. I need him to know the truth." Emily nodded, though she was puzzled. Henry had never mentioned a grandson before. "Do you have his address?" she asked. "We can make sure the letter gets to him." Henry shook his head, a faint tremor running through his frail body. "I don't know where he is," he admitted. "I haven't seen him in years. But he needs to know. He needs to know who he is." Emily's curiosity was piqued. She pulled up a chair and sat down beside Henry's bed, her hands resting lightly on her knees. "Mr. Thompson," she said carefully, "if you don't mind me asking, what do you mean by that? Who is your grandson?" Henry hesitated, his gaze drifting to the window. The sun was beginning to rise, casting a golden light over the city skyline. The world outside was waking up, but inside room 214, time seemed to stand still. "His name is Daniel," Henry said finally. "Daniel Thompson. He's my only family left, but I lost him. I lost him a long time ago." Emily's heart ached for the old man. She could see the pain in his eyes, the regret that had been buried deep for years, like a splinter that had never been removed. "Mr. Thompson," she said softly, "if you want, I can try to help you find him. Maybe we can track him down before it's too late." Henry looked at her, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," he whispered, "but I don't know where to start. I don't even know if he's still alive." Emily reached out and took his hand, her fingers warm against his cold, papery skin. "We'll find him," she said firmly. "I promise." And so Emily began her search. She started with the hospital records, but there was little information to go on. Henry had been admitted as a John Doe, and it had taken days to even learn his name. She tried searching online, but there were too many Daniel Thompsons in the world, and none of them seemed to match the description Henry had given her. Frustrated but determined, Emily decided to dig deeper. She reached out to local authorities, hoping they might have some record of Henry or his grandson. But again, she hit a dead end. It was as if Henry and Daniel had vanished off the face of the earth. As the days passed, Henry grew weaker. He continued to work on his letter, though his hands shook more with each passing day. Emily could see the urgency in his eyes, the desperation to finish what he had started. She knew she was running out of time. One evening, as Emily was preparing to leave for the day, she decided to take one last look through Henry's belongings. He had arrived at the hospital with nothing but the clothes on his back, but maybe there was something she had missed. She opened the small drawer beside his bed and began to sift through the few items he had. A pair of reading glasses, a worn-out wallet, and a faded photograph. Emily picked up the photograph and studied it closely. It was an old picture, yellowed with age, the edges frayed and curling. In it, a young man stood beside a woman, their arms wrapped around each other. The man looked like a younger version of Henry, his face unlined, his eyes bright with hope. The woman, Emily's breath caught in her throat. The woman looked familiar, though she couldn't quite place her. She turned the photograph over and saw a name written on the back in faded ink. Margaret and Henry, 1965. Margaret. The name rang a bell, but Emily couldn't remember why. She tucked the photograph into her pocket and decided to do some more research. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. Who was Margaret? And why did she look so familiar? She got up and grabbed her laptop, determined to find some answers. She started by searching for Margaret Thompson, but again there were too many results to sift through. Then she remembered the photograph. She pulled it out and studied it again, this time focusing on the background. It looked like they were standing in front of a small house with a tree in the yard. There was something about the house that seemed familiar, though she couldn't quite place it. Emily decided to try a different approach. She searched for Henry Thompson in the local archives, hoping to find some record of him. After hours of searching, she finally found something. A newspaper article from 1972. The headline read, "Local man disappears without a trace." Emily's heart raced as she read the article. It was about Henry Thompson, a man who had vanished from his home in the middle of the night, leaving behind his wife and young son. The article mentioned that Henry had been under investigation for embezzlement, though no charges had ever been filed. His wife, Margaret, had been left to raise their son alone. Emily's mind was spinning. Could this be the same Henry Thompson? She quickly searched for more information about Margaret and her son. She found a birth record for Daniel Thompson, born in 1970, but after that, the trail went cold. There was no record of Daniel after 1975 when he would have been 9 years old. Emily felt a chill run down her spine. What had happened to Daniel? And why had Henry disappeared all those years ago? She knew she had to find out. The next morning, Emily went straight to Henry's room. He was awake, his letter clutched tightly in his hands. "Mr. Thompson," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, "I need to ask you something. It's about your past." Henry looked at her, his eyes filled with sadness. "I knew this day would come," he said quietly. "I've been running from it for so long." Emily sat down beside him. "Mr. Thompson, I found an article about you. It said you disappeared in 1972. Is that true?" Henry nodded slowly. "Yes," he admitted. "I made a terrible mistake. I was accused of embezzlement, though I swear I didn't do it. But the evidence was stacked against me, and I was afraid. So I ran. I left my wife and son behind, and I've regretted it every day since." Emily's heart ached for him. "What happened to them?" she asked gently. Henry's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know," he whispered. "I tried to find them, but it was like they had vanished. I've spent years searching, but I never found them. And now it's too late." Emily reached out and took his hand. "It's not too late," she said firmly. "We'll find Daniel, I promise." But Henry shook his head. "No," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's too late for me. But maybe you can give him this." He handed her the letter, his hands trembling. "Please, make sure he gets it." Emily took the letter, her heart heavy. "I will," she promised. "I'll find him, Mr. Thompson. I won't let you down." Henry smiled faintly, his eyes closing. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you, Emily." Emily stayed by his side until he fell asleep, the letter clutched tightly in her hands. She knew she had to find Daniel, no matter what it took. Over the next few days, Emily continued her search. She reached out to private investigators, genealogists, anyone who might be able to help. She even posted on social media, hoping someone might recognize the name Daniel Thompson. And then, finally, she got a break. A woman named Sarah responded to her post, saying that she thought Daniel might be her uncle. Emily's heart raced as she arranged to meet Sarah. When they met, Sarah explained that her mother had been Daniel's sister. "Daniel disappeared when he was a kid," Sarah said. "My mom never talked about it much, but I know it broke her heart. She always said he was the kindest, most gentle soul she had ever known." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "Do you know what happened to him?" she asked. Sarah shook her head. "No," she admitted, "but I do know that he changed his name. He didn't want to be found." Emily's heart sank. "Do you know what name he took?" she asked. Sarah hesitated. "I think it was Daniels," she said. "Daniel Daniels." Emily's mind raced. She quickly searched for Daniel Daniels and found a man living in a small town just a few hours away. She knew she had to go see him. When she arrived at Daniel's house, her heart was pounding. She knocked on the door, and after a moment it opened. A man stood there, his hair graying at the temples, his eyes filled with a quiet sadness. "Daniel?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. The man nodded. "Yes," he said. "Can I help you?" Emily took a deep breath. "My name is Emily Carter," she said. "I'm a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital. I've been looking for you. Daniel's eyes widened. Why? He asked. Emily handed him the letter. This is from your grandfather, she said. He wanted you to have it. Daniel took the letter, his hands trembling. He opened it and began to read, his eyes filling with tears. When he finished, he looked up at Emily, his face a mixture of sorrow and relief. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for finding me. Emily smiled through her tears. You're welcome, she said. I'm just glad I could help. And as Daniel read the letter again, Emily knew that she had done the right thing. She had brought a family back together, even if it was just for a moment. And in that moment, she knew that Henry's legacy would live on, not just in the letter, but in the hearts of those he had left behind. The letter read, My dearest Daniel, if you are reading this, then I am gone. I have so many regrets in my life, but the greatest of all is leaving you and your mother behind. I was a coward, and I have paid for that cowardice every day of my life. I want you to know that I never stopped loving you. You were the light of my life, and I have carried you in my heart all these years. I hope that one day you can forgive me for the pain I caused. I also want you to know the truth about who you are. You come from a long line of strong, kind, and courageous people. You are a Thompson, and that means something. Never forget where you come from, and never forget that you are loved. I am so proud of the man you have become, even if I never got to see it. I hope that one day we can meet again in a place where there is no pain, no regret, and no goodbyes. Until then, know that I am with you, always, with all my love, Grandpa Henry. And as Daniel folded the letter and held it to his heart, Emily knew that Henry's legacy would live on, not just in the words he had written, but in the love that had brought them all together. Sometimes life gives us second chances, moments to heal, to forgive, and to reconnect. Henry's story reminds us that it's never too late to seek the truth, to mend broken bonds, and to honor the love that binds us, even across time and distance. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of the importance of family, forgiveness, and the power of love, then don't let it end here. There are so many more stories waiting to be told, so many more lives to explore, and so many more emotions to share. Subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story that will move you, inspire you, and remind you of the beauty and complexity of life. Every like, comment, and share helps us bring more heartfelt stories like this one to life. Together, let's keep exploring the moments that make us human, the tragedy, the pain, the leave, and the hope.